Well, hello, good afternoon and evening, everyone. I'm TOSCA LEE, and I am one of the Rogue Women writers. We're a group of 10 thriller writers whose backgrounds range from intelligence officer to journalism to crime scene analyst to special investigators, hostage negotiators, psychotherapists, international consultants, a former pageant queen, to White House strategists. A quick orientation. There's a chat room on the side of the screen. So if you click that icon, you can say hello to everybody from where you're from. So please feel free to do that. Go ahead and introduce yourself with a quick comment in the chat bar. For those of you joining us on Facebook Live, please be sure to say hello and leave a comment if you have anything you'd like to tell the authors, and especially if you have a question you'd like to ask. We will do our very best to try to accommodate them all. So we are in for a treat, as the authors tonight will be sharing some behind the scenes Q&A, reading a little from their work, sharing a few of their favorite treats, and maybe a few extra secrets about their writing life or their stories. All the books discussed here tonight should be available through your local bookstores, so please be sure to grab or order a copy. Support your local booksellers, and also check our guest's previous work out as well. So we have an exciting quadruple giveaway happening tonight. You have the opportunity to win a copy of The Falcon by Isabella Maldonado, The Omega Factor by Steve Berry, Sugar and Salt by Susan Wiggs, and Peril at the Exposition by NEV March. Winners are chosen from our registered attendees and will be notified in a few days after our event via email. So please keep your eyes on your inboxes. So, as I said, my name is TOSCA LEE. I'm an author of 11 novels, most recently The Line Between and A Single Light. And I'm coming to you today from the Nebraska countryside with my sidekick, Timber, the giant German Shepherd, who has crashed out. And I am thrilled to be emceeing this event tonight. So in no particular order, we're going to introduce our 4 authors. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about each one, and then we're going to come back for reading and discussion and to pick their brains, especially about their latest books. And we're going to also do some round robin questions. So if you have any questions for them, please feel free to post them at any time. Let's get to it. So first off, Isabella Maldonado. Wall Street Journal bestselling author Isabella Maldonado is a graduate of the FBI National Academy in Quantico and the first Latina to attain the rank of captain in the Fairfax County Police Department. Her assignments include hostage negotiator, department spokesperson, and precinct commander, and she retired as the commander of special investigations and forensics. Her books have been translated into 20 languages. Her best-selling FBI Special Agent Nina Guerrera series is soon to be a Netflix feature film starring Jennifer Lopez. So exciting. And we're going to ask a little bit more, but welcome, Isabella.
It's great to be here.
So excited to have you here. Next up, joining us, we have Steve Berry, who is the New York Times and #1 internationally best-selling author of 21 novels, translated into 41 languages with over, there's so many zeros, I can't decipher this number here. Let me just try this out. 25 million, 25 million copies in 52 countries. Somewhere in the world, every 30 seconds, one of his novels is sold. Trial lawyer for 30 years. Holding elective office for 14 of those years. He shares his passion for history with his wife, Elizabeth, which led them to create History Matters, a foundation dedicated to historic preservation. And we are going to hear a little bit more about History Matters later on. So welcome, Steve.
Thanks for having me.
Moving along, Susan Wiggs. Susan Wiggs' novels have reached #1 on the New York Times bestseller list and captured readers' hearts around the globe. With translations in more than 20 languages and 30 countries. She's been featured in the national media, including NPR, PRI, and USA Today, has given programs for the U.S. embassies in Buenos Aires and Montevideo, and is a popular speaker locally, nationally, internationally, and on the high seas. Harvard graduate, she is an avid hiker, amateur photographer, good skier and terrible golfer. Well, aren't we all? She currently lives in the Pacific Northwest. All right. Welcome, Susan.
Thank you so much. As you can see, I'm having a couple.
She's kind of here, I think. So hopefully we'll have her back in just a moment with her beautiful scenery behind her. There she is. There she is. All right.
Okay, is my video working now?
It's a little
frozen now. Oh my. All right. Sorry about that.
Okay, it's coming along.
Okay.
It's coming back. All right. Okay, last but not least, Nev March. Author Nev March is the recent winner of the Minotaur Books and Mystery Writers of America Award for Best First Crime Fiction. Congratulations, Nev. After a long career in business analysis, Nev returned to her passion and now both writes and teaches creative writing at Rutgers Osher Institute. A Parsi Zoroastrian herself, she lives in New Jersey with her husband and sons. Her books deal with issues of identity, race, and moral boundaries. Welcome, Nev. So returning now, I'm going to come back around to Isabella after welcoming everybody. Welcome, welcome. I'm going to start off with one of our favorite features of Rogue Reads, and that is our guests' favorite snacks and drinks. This is something we always ask. We ask them to share either theirs or their main character's favorite drink or snack. So Isabella's favorite drink is a margarita.
There you go.
And for some reason, our grocery store was out of limes. They're out of something every single day. So today it was lime. So this is a strawberry. So be sure to check out Isabella's awesome recipe on Rogue Women Writers at the Rogue Reads tab where you registered if you have not already. Isabella also recommends chips and salsa to accompany your margarita. Isabella, I have a very important question for you.
Yes.
After the tequila, what is the most important ingredient for an awesome margarita? The non-negotiable one. Is it the lime, the salt, or the Grand Marnier?
For me, I think it would be the Grand Marnier. You should not do not cheap out on that. It will ruin the taste of the drink.
Okay, Grand Marnier. All right. Isabella, will you please tell us about the Falcon?
Okay, so the Falcon is actually the third in the Nina Guerrera series. And in this one, she is called to an exclusive university in Arizona, the Arizona Institute of Technology, to help to solve the case where there have been 5 female co-eds have disappeared. And without a trace, no one has seen them being abducted. No one knows what's happened to them. And it's a huge mystery that must be solved.
Okay. All right. So would you be willing to read a few pages to us? And then I'll see if you'll maybe divulge an extra secret or two about the story itself.
Sure, I will. Yes, it's called it. Yep, there it is, the Falcon. So what I chose to do is this particular villain. Everybody is like telling me that this is like the creepiest bad guy they've ever seen. So I'm going to read a chapter from his perspective. It's well into the book, and so this is the bad guy who has one of the women in his clutches. It was past midnight when he reached behind Melissa's head to tug at the binding that held the blindfold in place. When she flinched, he used his most soothing tone. Be still. He offered her a promise. If you're good, I'll consider taking off those flex cuffs. She stilled. With extreme gentleness, he slid the fabric off, allowing it to drift to the hard cement floor. She squinted, even though the lone bulb overhead provided only dim light. She had been blindfolded all day. Her gaze settled on his face. This was the moment of truth. Horace, her voice quavered as she spoke. He was surprised. You recognize me? The drug he had used on her usually caused memory loss, but people reacted differently to chemicals. He hadn't been sure how much of their encounter she would recall. You're the campus cop, she said. Why did you? Her words trailed off, and he could see dawning comprehension in her expression. It's you, her gray eyes narrowed. You're the kidnapper. He could see her breathing quicken as realization morphed into fear. Now she knew the full scope of her predicament. He made no response to her comment and lifted the lid from a portable cooler the size of a lunchbox. Her watering eyes followed his movements as he bent to reach inside. Do you want what's in here? He asked her. I don't know. She took a shaky step back from him, the tether leading from her ankle strap to the bolt in the wall, sliding on the smooth floor. I think you do. He watched terror bloom on her face and stretched out the tension. She had no idea what was in the container. Would it be a knife, a gun, a set of electrodes? The possibilities were only limited by the size of the box. This was a critical step in the process. He would make sure she understood who was in control. Slowly, he lifted a chilled water bottle from the cooler. Her gaze darted from the bottle in his hand to his face, trying to read his intent. He smiled. Cool, fresh water. Doubt clouded her lovely features. He held it out to her. The lid is still sealed. Look, I haven't tampered with it. She ran a pink tongue over parched lips. Aware the sedative and vomiting would have made her desperately thirsty, he reached out with his other hand to unscrew the top. A discernible snap signaled that he had told the truth. The seal was unbroken until he twisted the plastic cap. He angled the bottle, allowing a bead of condensation to trickle down its side, plopping to the dry floor. He moved to stand over the drain in the corner and held the container's open top above it. I'll pour it all down. He tilted his hand, allowing a few precious drops to spill down to the metal grate. No. He righted the bottle. Are you thirsty? She could only manage a raspy whisper. Please. I will always provide for you. He gave her a long, assessing look. But there are rules. Creepy, right?
Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, I so don't want to be alone in a dark room with that guy. Just saying. I'm scared to ask about like what inspired and how he came. This guy sprang to life and everything.
Yeah.
Is there a little tiny secret you want to tell us about the story of the background of this?
Sure. Actually, this sort of comes from my days and experience as a hostage negotiator. When I was in training to do that, one of the things we had to learn about was Stockholm syndrome and manipulation of captives, and how captives are manipulated into doing things against their will without even having to use overt force. And so, you know, in the first book in the series, I had like a really, really brutal, violent, you know, serial killer. In the second book, it was, you know, something altogether different, someone who used like weapons at a distance kind of thing. In this one, I wanted to use someone who used no physical violence whatsoever, total mind control, total manipulation, just total sort of mental and emotional dominance from, you know, what he learned with how he works. And so I just wanted to bring some of that kind of experience, because it really is amazing when you learn about what people go through when they're being held captive.
All right. And having no physical force at all makes him almost scarier. Like
it does. That's why I think it's funny, because people think this guy is scarier than the first guy, who was way more brutal. So I find that fascinating.
I agree with them. All right, we're going to come back, Isabella, but for now we're going to swing over to Steve's office and say hello to Steve. Steve, like his famous character Cotton Malone of Templar Legacy fame, loves cranberry juice, which I also happen to love. Alone, unsweetened in cocktails, and with lime. So Steve, what is the best way to drink cranberry juice? Straight up on ice, or how?
You just said it. With a lime, doesn't really matter. I don't really use ice, so you know, a little lime in it, perfect.
All right. Well, Steve, tell us about the omega factor.
Well, it's a standalone novel. I usually write Cotton Malone. I've done 16 Cotton Malones, and I switched publishers. I moved from Minotaur at Macmillan over to Grand Central. When I did, they wanted to start with a standalone. They didn't want to start with Cotton Malone, which was kind of bad because I'd already written the next Cotton Malone, and so it was already done. But they said they wanted to start, so that's fine. So I had this guy in my head, this guy who works for UNESCO in the Cultural Liaison and Investigative Office, which is CLIO, which is the Muse of History. He goes around the world, he protects cultural treasures. So in a lot of ways, he's like Cotton Malone, in that we deal with action, history, secrets, conspiracies, those kinds of things. But he's very different than Cotton because he's younger, he has a different background, different family structure, different motivations. And his name is Nick Lee, and he gets caught up here with the most stolen, violated, and vandalized work of art in all of history, and that is the Get altarpiece. And it was fun to send this guy out on this brand new adventure. And he gets caught up in something quite unexpected that leads him into areas that he never saw coming. And the Omega factor is, for me, a typical treasure hunt, going through Belgium and France, and on a search for something. And I don't want to say it's a secret that will destroy the world, because it's not. But it does deal with the Catholic Church, and it deals with an issue of the Catholic Church that I've never dealt with myself, and I've never seen anyone who has dealt with it before. I've done 4 books with the Catholic Church. I thought I was through with them, but I had one more. And Nick gets caught up in solving this 2,000-year-old puzzle.
So Steve, this Ghent altarpiece, can you tell us a little bit about what does it look like? What is it exactly? And also, why is it the most vandalized, dismantled, or stolen artifact in history? What exactly is it about this
Nobody knows why. That's what the cool thing about it. And it's been attacked 13 times in the last 600 years. No one quite knows why. Hitler stole it in 1939. It was recovered in 1945. If you watch the movie The Monuments Men, that's what they were after, and that's what they found. One of the panels was stolen in 1934, never been seen again, and that's dealt with in the novel. It's composed of 12 panels. It's about 15, 20 feet long, maybe about 10 feet tall. It's very large. It was not the first oil painting ever done, but it was one of the first to maximize the use of oil. And the painting contains an enormous amount of detail, minute, microscopic. You've got to be with high resolution to see it detail, which is phenomenal considering it was painted in 1342 when they barely had lenses at this point in time. But the painter who created it, Jan van Eyck, was a miniaturist, and he could paint very, very small. And I was able to excuse me, I was able to fashion a treasure hunt from the stuff that's in the painting and all of the secrets and detail that's there.
Fascinating. And now I want to ask you about your new main character, Nick Lee. Really like the last name. So this is your first story with Nick. After 16 books and so much success with Cotton Malone, what's it like to start all over with someone new? And is it a little nerve-wracking? Is it exciting?
Well, it was a little nerve-wracking, yeah, because you get comfortable where you are. It's a world you've created, and you can work with it. But it was fun. Excuse me. I've been feeling poorly the last couple of weeks, so I've still got this cough going on that's still here with me. He was fun to create. He's been in my head about 7-8 years, and I never thought I'd get a chance to create him, but the opportunity came along, and I got to do it. Whether we'll see him again, that's all up to the readers, really. If they like him. My problem is I can't write more than 1 book a year, unfortunately. My brain can only take 1 a year. So if we do some more with Nick, I'm probably going to have a little help to make that happen.
I think you've already had a few votes for Nick to return.
Well, he's doing well right now. I mean, I've been surprised. The problem with a standalone is that's just it. It's a standalone, and your fans really get used to having what they want, and they don't want something different. We've been very fortunate here. It seems like the Cotton Malone fans have embraced him very well. So it's been really good to see. So I think you'll probably see him again, but not. It'll be a couple of years.
Might be a year or two. Okay. And lastly, for right now, history lies at the heart of every Steve Berry novel. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about your research for this particular book.
Well, it's normal for me. It was normal. I used 300 to 400 sources. That's what I use for every novel. They're mainly books. If you'll look over my shoulder here, that's a lot of them right there. Those are travel guides that I bought. These are 19th and early 20th century travel guides I use there, but I usually go to a used bookshop about 2 hours from here. It's huge, and I buy most of my books there. And as I said, about 300 to 400 per novel, particularly this one. There were a lot of subjects in this novel I knew nothing about, so I had to learn about all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And there was a trip. I went to Ghent. So I was there, and I've been to southern France, and I've been up to the monastery and the abbey that I used in the novel. So I visited all the locales in this novel, which is normal for me with most books.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, thank you, Steve. And we're going to come back to you in just a little bit. So for now, let's move on to Susan. Susan has shared 2 recipes inspired by sugar and salt. The first is a Baja, Oklahoma cocktail consisting of tequila, lime juice, and the grapefruit soda or citrus drink of your choice. And it sounds very delicious, and we like the tequila. And the other is Texas sheet cake, which this is as close as I could come. I did not make this, so but Texas sheet cake. So, Susan, I know that you like to bake. And I have a question for you. If you could have only one kind of cake for the rest of your life, what would it have to be?
Oh, that's so easy. I thought it was going to be a hard one. Now, there's a cake recipe that I make. It's actually not in the book. It's not in Sugar and Salt, but it's on my blog, called The Cake of 1,000 Faces. And
I saw that one. I saw that. Yes.
It's kind of famous because I think it first appeared in, I don't know, maybe Sunset magazine or something. And what's beautiful about it, and it's the one you could pick forever, is that you can change its character. It has the same basic ingredients no matter what you put, but if it's berry season, you put berries. If it's apple season, you use apples or pears. And so it's incredibly flexible, and you can be creative. And so I make it a lot, and it definitely brings all the boys to the yard. So
okay.
Faces. I think if you go to susanwiggs.com and search the blog, it will pop up for you. But it's a winner, and you don't have to use a mixer. That's another thing. You only use one bowl. You only use one pan. So these things matter to us bakers, don't they?
I like that a lot. And those things matters to us who are not bakers normally. So
Okay,
even better.
All
right. Susan, will you tell us about Sugar and Salt?
So Sugar and Salt, here's my copy right here. I actually just got author copies, and I'm sure my fellow authors, Isabella and Steve, will tell you that's one of those moments that never gets old. You know, this box drops on your doorstep, and you kind of know what it is, and there's anticipation. And, you know, my publicist is always saying, well, turn your camera on, show yourself, you know, and I'm like, no. I'm usually, you know, in my bathrobe with my cup of coffee. So I'm not camera ready, but it's that moment when you open it up and you finally get to hold the finished book in your hands, which is huge. And so that's one of my favorite moments in the publication of a book. And so this one just arrived a couple days ago. So I haven't even had, you know, that bonding time with it where I get to look at the pages and hold it in my hand and
smell it.
People who did the blurb. And yeah, so anyway, it's that new. It's so hot off the press. It's smoking hot. And it will be out, I believe, the 26th of this month. And so this is my first look at it. And this is actually my first event that I'm doing. So thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to do this. And I love to hear about other people's process. Isabella's book and Steve's book sound like way better than mine. I wish I'd written those books and not this book, but you know, it is what it is. Right now it's at that kind of crossroads, which is another moment that I love, where it's not my book anymore. You know, when every reader reads a different book. And so it's going to go out into the world and, you know, somebody else is going to bring their background and their creativity to it. And it will be a totally different object than the thing that I released into the wild. So I kind of love that process as well.
Absolutely. Well, Susan, would you read a little bit to us? Would you read a few pages and then also give us a little setup for that?
Sure. Yeah. I'm going to read just the tail end of the prologue, and it just needs very little setup. Margot, the main character, she has finally reached this moment in her life that it's very clear from the beginning that she's worked really, really hard. She's getting kind of the equivalent of a James Beard Award, but a really, really politically correct, awesome James Beard. You know, I made up the name. It's like she sees her fiance and her family and you know, everybody that she loves, and she's like, finally I made it through this horrific ordeal. It's not really a thriller in the sense of a Steve Barry book or an Isabella Maldonado book, but it's definitely, there's a horrific crime and experience that she goes through, and she's finally survived this. And so this is her moment, and this is the prologue, which, as prologues do, will end horribly wrong for her. So here we go. And I should also set up that she originates from Texas, but now she's in the Bay Area. She's in San Francisco, on the same street as the Lost and Found Bookshop, my last book. And it's not really a sequel to that book, but I just used the same street because I liked it. Anyway, Margot paused for another picture with Buckley DeWitt, a senior writer and editor with Texas Monthly Magazine. He had been the first journalist to notice her back when he was a stringer for the magazine years before. He wore his considerable girth with good cheer, having built a reputation for finding and extolling the best barbecue in the country. He was the only one present today who knew her other life. He leaned close to Margot and lowered his voice. "We need to talk. It's about Jimmy Hunt." Just the mention of his name turned her blood to ice. "I already told you everything and you published it," she said. "I got nothing more to say to you about the Hunts." But nothing, Buckley. I'm done with all that." She gathered her composure and turned to greet some of the other guests. In reality, she would never truly be done, but she had moved on, and she intended to keep some distance between past and present. One woman, a stranger, wove and bobbed her way through the crowd as if particularly keen to connect with Margot. She waved a commemorative menu in one hand and held a manila envelope and a Sharpie marker in the other. She didn't quite fit in with the earnest civic leaders, tattooed kitchen workers, and fellow Perdita Street merchants. This woman wore battered denim and dirty sneakers. She had long, straight hair streaked with gray. Tobacco stains shaded her fingers and teeth. With a burst of energy, she darted forward and favored Margot with a giddy smile that didn't quite match the sharp look in her eyes. "Margie Salinas," she intoned as a question. Margot paused, unused to hearing the name. She frowned, looking from side to side. Her heart skipped a beat. "Sorry, what?" "Margie Salinas, aka Margot Salton," the woman said. Margot had not heard that name in years. She never thought she would hear it again. She never wanted to hear it again. The world slowed down. The noise of the crowd roared in her ears and then faded to a muffled, undifferentiated babble. She could see a raft of tiny details in sharp relief. The gorgeous setting overlooking the bay, the twinkling lights, the lavish tables, the smiling faces, all the things she wanted to hold forever in her heart. Then, in the blink of an eye, the details resolved into the discomfiting, unfamiliar face before her. "Who the hell are you?" she asked. The woman passed her the manila envelope, pressing it firmly into her hand. "You've been served," she said. So.
Dun, dun, dun. Okay.
Dun, dun, dun.
Dun, dun, dun. Is there one little secret about the story or behind the story that you could share with us?
Yeah, this is, I wrote this book. I started it in 2020, right as the pandemic was ramping up. And so I was all alone and, worked through the book. And I realized that it would be impossible to be writing about a contemporary launch of a high-end restaurant unless I addressed the pandemic. And so I was very fretful about that. And my editor, who's very wise and a problem solver, she said, "It's fine." She said, "Make the whole story take place in 2017." And so it's a very small detail, but I think it kind of saves me from having to do a lot of fancy footwork and answer for a lot of current issues. But then now the book got published, and another issue that arises in the book, there's a couple. There are two other ones that kind of got destroyed by current events, and one of them has to do with a woman's choice, her healthcare choices. And so I ended up kind of in a pickle about that, but in a good way, because it turned it from just a woman's journey to a book club book, basically. So those two things, and I had nothing to do with them. It wasn't, it wasn't in the plan, but it sort of worked its way into the book.
I see. All right. Well, thank you for that. I always like to hear these little behind the scenes excerpts and notes. So thank you so much, Susan. Nev, welcome. So Nev, one of her favorite snacks is chocolate covered cashews and raspberry stuffed chocolates. But more interesting, Nev's favorite drink is one that she invented called Green Meadowbrook. So Nev, will you tell us all about this drink that you invented? Ah, there it is. Look how pretty it is. Lift it up a little higher. Look at the bottom. Look at that.
There you go. Yeah, I didn't use enough orange juice. I didn't have any, so I put mango and it sank to the bottom.
It's beautiful.
But it is very pretty. It's a cocktail for people who don't really like alcohol. I don't seem to be able to tolerate much. So it's very easy to make. You just pour a little teeny tiny bit of gin or your alcohol of choice over some ice just at the bottom, and then fill it up with two things: ginger beer, which is actually quite spicy. I'm from India. My spice level tolerance is kind of high, so a little bit of that, and then coconut water instead of soda. It goes healthy. And then right at the end, the blues from Blue Curacao, which should be floating on the top, but because it's not enough orange juice, which I add in before the Blue Curacao, it gives it a green color. Today there's no mixing of the juice, so
Beautiful.
I would have to rename this one.
It looks like the Ukrainian flag, actually, when you hold it up. So
yeah,
well, that's beautiful. The recipe, by the way, is on the Rogue Women Writers website at Rogue Reads. So you can go there and you can try it out yourself. All right. So Nev, tell us about Peril at the Exposition.
Okay. It's a continuation of Captain Jim's story, but big change. No, there are two changes. It's actually from his wife's point of view. Most of the story, about 80% of it, is her POV. He does pop in, towards the end of the book, at least midway, and you have some alternating chapters with his point of view. So there's a couple of reasons for that. That's one big change. The other change was location. Murder in Old Bombay was in Bombay. Somebody told me, well, it's now called Mumbai. I'm like, yeah, the city is Mumbai, but Bombay is a state of mind. So it's set in that colonial era, except that at the end of that book, the couple comes to Chicago, and they come to Boston. And then in this book, most of the action is in Chicago. So we have a reluctant sleuth. Diana is a young society woman, really. She is not trained to be a detective, but she's married to one. And he does what he always does. He goes off to solve mysteries. The only problem is he doesn't come back. And so at this 5-week point, she's fretting. She gets some information, which makes her very, very concerned. I'm actually going to read about that. I'll read you that part. And so she has to go to Chicago, really just to meddle and figure things out and try to get him back. Really, she just wants to go and tell him, let's go home. But of course, that doesn't happen. And she gets sucked deeper and deeper into the morass, learning more about America and about Chicago and about the Gilded Age. It's not the Golden Age, it's the Gilded Age. So I should say something about the World's Fair. This is happening in 1893. When I read about it and I did a good bit of research, 27 million people are supposed to have come to the World's Fair out of a population of about 60 million, almost half the country over 6 months. And so when she realizes that there's something dangerous going to happen, that's a frightening prospect. Other facts, the book is full of facts that now seem mind-boggling. I attended the Parliament of World Religions 2 years in a row and loved it. And I realized the first Parliament of World Religions was in the 1893 World's Fair at the same time in Chicago. So, oh, lovely. I'm going to include that because Swami Vivekananda came from India and he introduced the world to Hinduism and Vedanta and yoga. Yoga started with his arrival. But, oh my, the World Convention of Anarchists happened to convene in Chicago that very summer.
Wow.
So what could go wrong? I don't know.
So much happening in one place. Well,
Oh,
Nev,
yeah.
do you have a segment that you would like to read to us?
Sure, it's a page and a half. So at this point, it's chapter 3, and Diana has just been given or obtained a letter which contains some mysterious phrases, and also it's not addressed to her, it's addressed to someone else, and it contains the last words are from in Jim's hand, tell no one. So a knock on the door interrupted my reverie. Who could it be on a Sunday? Puzzled, I opened to find Tobias Brown on the corridor, standing well back from the door. He'd brought Jim's wages. Thank you, I said evenly, accepting the envelope from the colored man. Any word from Jim? I asked him that every week. He must have noticed my present malaise, for he hesitated. No, Mrs. He must not know much, or was told to reveal nothing. Disturbed by the strange German letter, my composure frayed. Should I invite him in? Should I invite him in? In India, it would not be appropriate, but here? His earnest creased face and tufted silver hair reassured me. He'd always treated me with careful respect. Would you like some tea? I asked. His eyes widened, then he smiled. That's very kind of you, ma'am, but I think not. I stepped closer. Tobias, I'm afraid for Jim. Have you heard anything about him? Tobias looked down. Jim needed that letter translated, so I'd planned to mail him my transcription. Should I send it to the Dupreys instead? Yet Jim had written, tell no one. Step inside a minute, Tobias. I must speak with you. Yes, Mrs. Scraping off his shoes on the doorstep, he came in reluctantly. Please call me Diana. Yes, Lady Diana. He smiled and pulled in his lips. He knew something. I was sure of it. Where is Jim, Tobias? Despite my best intentions, my worry is spilled out. Gathering steam like a locomotive pulling from the station, they chugged out, each car dragging the next. Once moving, I could not contain them. He's been injured so many times, just 6 months in Boston, and they sent him off alone. How can he manage? He's a good detective, God knows, but this could be beyond him. Why didn't they send someone else? Slowly, Tobias said, I believe they did, ma'am. I recalled Jim's words before he left. Jim mentioned Mr. Arnold Baldwin. Tobias turned his deep, sad gaze on me. Yes, Mom, it was Mr. Baldwin's assignment, but I'm afraid he's no more. The floor seemed to tilt under my feet. He's dead? Ma'am, he was killed some weeks ago. Murdered. Baldwin had been murdered, and no word from Jim. I steadied myself and asked, is it common in your business that an operative is gone for 5 weeks? Tobias opened and closed his mouth. What wasn't he telling me? I'm just the porter, Mom. Then you see everybody coming and going every day? He blinked. To be gone this long without word? That's not common, no. Jim had mailed the letter to Grimke 2 weeks ago at most. Urgency propelled me like a hand against my back. I must find him, but how? Shifting from one foot to the other, Tobias said, you could ask the Dupreys, Mom. Master Alfred, who built the agency, and his son, Mr. Peter.
Thank you, Nev. Is there a little secret that you can tell us about this story or about its coming about?
A little secret to tell you. There's so many parts to it. I guess the little secret is that Dinah goes through the emotional journey of an immigrant. It has many phases, and they kind of mirror my own progression 30 years ago when I first came to America.
All right. So you have some special insight there that was able to help inform her character. So thank you. All right. Well, we're going to do a little round robin questions now. So I'm going to go back to Isabella. Isabella, there's a movie in the works. Can you dish? What can you tell us about this exciting movie in development right now?
Just a little bit. They like to be tight-lipped about these things, but J.Lo has announced this, and there was a big announcement and everything. Netflix will be doing it as a feature-length film. And right now, obviously she's one of the busiest people on the planet. She has so much going on. So I'm hopeful that maybe I'll be, next or the one after that up. I did get to be executive producer and consultant. So I do understand that the script has, gone back to Netflix, and I guess they're working on it and things like that. So it's coming along, but there's not an exact date yet. So we shall, see how that goes. Oh, and also I wanted to apologize for everyone when I ran off a moment ago. I hate doing stuff like that, but I actually have a writing shed. I'm up here in the mountains, and I'm very blessed that I have this writer's shed, but I had it all wide open, and there's a storm rolling in. You may be able to hear the thunder in the background. And I was afraid that the rain was going to pour in on my computer and everything. So it's like, I panicked and I ran over there and closed the windows. So I am, Nev, I apologize very much. I did get to hear most of what you said, but I ran over there real quick. So I just wanted to everybody understand writer's emergency.
That is a writer's emergency.
Yeah.
So I just want to know, when J.Lo attached herself to the project, what was your reaction?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So what happened is actually when the first book in the series I'm working on now, the Nina Guerrera series, the first book is The Cipher. And I did not expect this to happen. It's like as soon as it launched, it just exploded. It just shot everywhere. I did not know this was going to happen. And the next thing I knew, there was kind of like there was a bidding war in Hollywood over it. And I was not even sure, I had to get a Hollywood agent. My literary agent got a Hollywood agent for me, and, we're negotiating and all these things are happening. And so because of that, things were getting heated up. And I remember there was at one point where J.Lo's production company is Nuyorican Productions. And the people who work there said, you know what, we're going to have J.Lo read your book. And I cannot tell you the feeling of thinking, oh my gosh, J-Lo is reading my book. That is so surreal, because I actually went to one of her concerts a couple of years before that. So like in 2018, I'm in the audience watching her in Las Vegas. And then in 2020, she's reading my book. Okay. My head, I still can't even contemplate this. But then they got back to me very quickly and they're like, okay, she read your book. She wants this for herself. And, you know, she's bringing in her best offer and, you know, working. It was amazing. It was just
Wow.
completely surreal. Couldn't believe it.
I can only imagine. I can only imagine. All right, well, I'm going to continue on the round robin very quickly, because I know that Susan has to leave right at 8 o'clock, I believe. So I'm gonna go to Steve real quick first. Steve, tell us about History Matters, would you?
It's a foundation that Elizabeth, my wife, and I created about 13 years ago. And we go around the country and we help raise money for historic preservation. We do it through unique ways. We'll do dinners, meet and greets, luncheons, all kinds of things like that. But one of the main ways we do it is we teach a writer's workshop, and we teach a 4-hour workshop. And I do 3 hours and Elizabeth does an hour on the business of writing. And we charge for all of that. All of that, you buy your way in with contributions, whatever it may be in each area. And all of the money that's raised goes to the project we're there to support. We don't charge to come, and we don't charge expenses. We pay our own way to go to all these places. So it's basically a way to use us for a day or two to raise money. And we've raised about $2.5 million for about 80 different projects around the country. So we did okay. We've been out of business, you know, for 2021 and 22. We're hoping to get back into business next year.
Okay, and so anyone interested in attending these workshops should keep an eye on your website, correct?
Yeah, we'll post the History Matters events there. We try to do 2 or 3 a year now. We used to do a lot more, but we've cut it down to 2 or 3. And we try to find good partners in these communities who know how to raise money and are good at it. And we work with them. And we've had some inquiries for next year. We're exploring those opportunities now.
All right, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm going to move on to Susan. Susan, you started writing at a very early age. I think you self-published your first novel at the age of 8. Am I correct?
I did. I was one of those, you know, straight out of the womb, I guess.
And the title of this book was?
A book about some bad kids. I still have it. It's so charming that I still have it. I was 8 years old when I wrote it. I had that teacher that you wish every kid would have. Her name was Mrs. Green. And she said, well, if you want to be a book writer, you should write a book. And she gave me all the materials. And she was so proud and I wrote a lot of books for her. And she was so proud she would read them to the class. And I'm like, whoa, I want to be not just a writer, a commercial writer. I want some readers. And so that was kind of a very, very, very early career moment. And then I sold my first novel to a commercial publisher in 1986. And I published like a book or two almost every year since. So
as a young writer growing up and as a teacher, because you have been a teacher, what would you say are the most important things parents and teachers watching tonight can do to foster storytelling, writing, and reading among young people?
First of all, read and write among young people. Let them see you read a book, please. I love my devices. I love my Kindle and all that stuff, but there's nothing more powerful than a kid seeing an adult that they're close to or that they admire sitting and reading a book. Same with writing. I handwrite all my books in longhand. And so my daughter, who's a wonderful reader and writer, she grew up just, at my side doing that. And I think my parents probably modeled that for me. And so I think model the behavior that you want to see and validate. I was never judged for what I wanted to read or write. Nobody ever said you should read this, don't read that. It was a total smorgasbord for me. And it turned me into a good student, a good reader, and eventually I hope a good writer. And so I kind of think that rather than lead a student or a child or something, be the person that you are, and they'll come along for the ride.
Mhm. Thank you so much. I think that there's probably a lot of authors that have been on Rogue Reads who could attest to the power of an exceptionally encouraging teacher. So in their development along the way. Thank you, Susan. All right, Nev, I've got
For
one.
having me. That was this is just a wonderful discussion. I missed this, so thank you.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if I don't get back around to you before you have to run off, thank you so much for being with us tonight.
Okay. Oh, you're so welcome.
Nev, so I've got a question for you. We talked just briefly about, you briefly mentioned your first book, Murder in Old Bombay, which is the precursor to Peril at the Exposition. And it was inspired by a true unsolved mystery of the deaths of 2 Parsi women. So I was just wondering if you could share a little bit about the mystery, but also how the mystery became a code word for girls in the Parsi community. And maybe tell us a little bit about the Parsi community for those who are not perhaps familiar.
Absolutely. India is home to many, many different religions, ethnic groups, subgroups, dialects, minorities, and the Parsis are really descendants of medieval Persian refugees. So in roughly the year 1000, Islam had conquered Persia pretty much, and a few boats left Iran, came down the Straits of Hormuz, found a home in Gujarat, and stayed Zoroastrian. They retained their ethnic and their religious identities. So I'm one of them, the descendants of that group of refugees to India. The Parsis also got, pretty well educated, became administrators for the British, had a lot of trading in their blood, I guess just very enterprising, and so ended up having a lot to do with India's industrialization and progress, really, in India. So it's a fairly wealthy but well-established group, very, very tiny group. Just to give you the numbers, we like to say we're 100,000 worldwide, and maybe less than half of that are in India.
Okay, thank you very much. I just was thinking, this is a very small group and one that many people may not have heard of. So thank you for telling us that.
You asked also about there's a mystery in the first
mystery
book,
of
right?
the unsolved murder.
Yeah, so that book kind of insisted on being written. There was a real life tragedy that happened in 1893. 2 girls fell from the top of a university tower in broad daylight. They were the real victims were in fact the wife and the sister of a young 22-year-old law student who later, became one of India's greatest inventors. He was a serial entrepreneur in later life, never remarried, but he created about 17 different industries, and his business today is one of the largest conglomerates in Asia called Godrej, the Godrej Foundation. But few people realize that he had this tragedy when he was so young. The problem was it was never solved. The police was very very primitive in those days. They come from the army essentially just to keep the natives under control, essentially is their job. So when you have these 2 fairly wealthy and privileged women falling, it caused waves in the Bombay Indian community. There were petitions and whatnot, but was never solved. So when I was growing up, which is 90 years after this incident, we still talked about it, except I thought it had just happened like a few years ago. Nobody told me it was 90 years ago. And they would say, if I tried to do something, overly daring, or try to go someplace that was considered unsafe, I would be told, remember the Godrej girls, remember those girls, because we never knew what happened to them. So the book kind of gives you a fictional explanation to what could have happened to them. and why some of those details are so strange. I used all the details from the real case, but I found a way to reconcile it. And a lot of it had to do with the times. The 1890s were a very tumultuous time in most of the world, because it's just on the cusp of the century, but in India as well. So much happening at that time.
Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the insight into the unsolved murder and also the Parsi community. So thank you. Well, I cannot believe how quickly our time has been flying by. And, as fate would have it, I have all these other questions that I have outlined for everybody, including, so many things. I things I wanted to ask about, falconry from Isabella, and I wanted to talk more about the Templar legacy and history with Steve, and talk about San Francisco and researching the lost and found bookshop, and also talk more about old Mumbai with Nev. But I think at this point that we should turn to our reader questions for a little Q&A, so that we can be sure to fit those in. So Chris, I think that we've had a few questions coming in. If you want to help direct us to what those might be.
Yeah, we actually have had we have one question that is directed to Steve from Leica Haney from Facebook. Do your book characters talk to you, Steve? And if they do, have you had to change something in the story because of it?
I know this is going to sound terrible, and I'm probably going to get in trouble for it, but I've never adhered to the philosophy that your characters talk to you. They're not real. They're coming out of my brain. I'm in total control of them. I tell them what to do. I tell them where to go, everything about it. So they really never talk to me. Now, do I notice inconsistencies and problems along the way when I'm writing? Absolutely, yes. And fix them. And occasionally a character, as I'm developing him or her, becomes a little overwhelming and a little more than I thought they were going to be. And I want them to be more. So I've just never, I've heard that a lot about how the story talks to you and do it, but writing books is so doggone hard. I wish they did talk to me. It would make things a whole lot better. But I just sort of keep them under control and make sure that everything is consistent and that they have the right crucibles and they have the right motivations and they stay consistent throughout the story.
Okay, great. Thanks. How about everyone else, as long as we're there? I'd like to know what everybody else has to say about that too. So I'm going to add you all in here and get you to comment on that. I think Susan had to leave. I don't see.
Susan had to run, I believe.
Yeah, I don't see her anymore. And then we'll see if anyone else in the audience has some questions. Mostly we had a lot of comments. People are just absolutely thrilled about thank you for answering my question. People are like, I'm going out to buy the books. There are several people who just are like, it's so scary, the reading that Isabel did. Everybody was like, oh my God. So I think it's great. And so Lisa online also says, have any of you had your character speak to you? So can Nev and Isabella answer that question? And then we're
happy to.
Question for Steve again.
Sure. So my characters talk a lot. In fact, this book came out of Diana. She wouldn't stop bugging me that she wanted her own story, because Murder in Old Bombay was all Jim. Captain Jim had his say and she wanted hers. So yeah, the characters, pop in and out. I have to tell you though, sometimes they don't speak. And I had this character, Blake Baldwin, and I'm waiting, come on, talk to me, tell me, what do you look like? Tell me. Nothing. And so I'm waiting. I try a few things out, giving him a start, nothing, crickets. So I'm going, okay, something's wrong. And I realize Blake is very modern. It's just got a modern sound to it. So I went, all right, what's a really, antique sounding, not very, Adolphus sounding, but antique sounding American name. And I came up with Arnold Baldwin. And suddenly he wouldn't stop. He gave me his whole backstory. He said, I want more space in the book. It was hard to rein him in. So I don't know what it is. People always told me, keep your names very simple, keep them very, easy to pronounce. If you look at Dickens, those names are not easy to pronounce. They're unusual names, and therefore they're fascinating. They make the character. So I don't know if there's any rule around it.
Nev, I loved it when you were reading from his voice. You really, with your Indian accent, did a great American drawl and in the process of reading that. And it was like, I could hear your accent coming through a little, but you really did a great job. So Isabella, you want to answer the question too, real quick?
Yeah, just I'll keep it brief. I'm more like Steve in that I'm kind of always in the driver's seat with what's going on. But what I do that may be a little bit different, or maybe not, is that sometimes I feel like I need to inhabit a character more deeply in order to really write from their perspective. And one of my techniques to do that is I do what I call dream casting. So I choose actors who first, I'll have something in mind, and then I'll look up, famous actors, and then I'll find one invariably as I'm looking around. And my husband helps me do this. He's much better at it than I am. But as we're looking around, and it's like all of a sudden I'll hit a face and I'm like, that's it. That's Nina Guerrero, or that's, Sam Stark, or, whoever it is that is. And once I get that, I can put that picture like up on my screen, and somehow I feel like I can write that character so much better, differentiate his or her personality, how they talk, how they think. Getting that visual is it just like takes it to the next level for me.
Did you visualize J-Lo?
No, actually, I didn't visualize right away. But once that happened, now for all of the other books I've written, yeah, she's right there.
So here's a question for Steve, another one for Steve. Karna wants to know that years ago, she read your terrific book about the Romanov family, and she wanted to know if it was published in Russia, and if so, what kind of reactions you got from the Russian readers.
I don't know if it was published legally in Russia. Russia steals the books basically. So you don't really buy Russian rights because they just steal them and publish however they want to over there, because they don't really have any copyright laws in there to deal with it. So I think it was published in Russian. I believe I do have a Russian volume in there. Never heard a word from anybody. Not a word, not a soul.
And then also, Rob Friedman wants to know if you miss the practice of law.
Not even a tiny little bit. Not even a tiny little bit.
He grinned a lot when he said that too.
No, I practiced law for 30 years and it was great, but no more.
Well, and so Lisa wants to know if any of you have ever had a character had such an unexpected tragedy happen that it really shook you, that your character had an unexpected tragedy, something you didn't intend to write, but kind of came up in the process of writing the book.
That happens all the time. That's all the time. Yeah.
Sorry. Go ahead, Steve.
No, I was going to say that happens all the time. I mean, that's a common occurrence. The characters go off, when we're creating them, things say, wow, let's go there. Let's go there. Let's do that. Yeah. But I never had them do an unexpected tragedy because I'm creating them. They're coming out of my brain. So they're mine. But yeah, they all the time you get a better idea saying, yeah, this would be great. Let's go over here and let's do this. Absolutely.
I have to admit that I did have an unexpected tragedy occur. I was building this character who was, very interesting and represented the poorer women in India and just charming. And so at the 3/4 mark, someone actually sent me an email saying, I could not believe what you did at the 3/4 mark. So yeah, this is not something I had planned, but when I wrote it, when it kind of happened, I was in tears in writing it, and I said, "My God, can I leave this in?" But it needed to be in because it showed the darkness of the world that character was facing. It was not, a cushy, comfy, cozy, let's sit down and solve this mystery kind of world. It was a world where dark things happen. And so it had to be. But when I presented it to my critique group, there was silence for a very long time. And so I'm sitting there with my pencil in my hand going, oh dear, this is bad. This is very bad. It's so bad that they don't know how to tell me. And one of the people got up and stomped around the room and said, I can't believe you did that. So yeah, people get very emotional about characters.
So ZJ wants to know what kind, if any, support you get from your publishers to promote your books. Are you having to do the marketing on your own? Isabella, do you want to field that?
Yeah, I love my publisher. They do amazing things. Really, really help put the book out there. I know everyone's going to throw rocks at me for saying this now, but actually I was really very blessed. The second book in the Guerrera series, the book actually was on it was in the New York Times Square in New York City, up on a big, one of the signs. Oh gosh, words escape me. I can't even think, right? But yeah, huge. And then another billboard and by Penn, out in front of Penn Station, so that they took pictures of it and sent it to me. All kinds of ads everywhere, and really put the word out and everything, which was incredibly helpful for me because it really took my career to the next level and really put me out there. And that's really what I needed. I was able to write, but it's like someone like Steve, he's like an institution. He is truly a master. And there are millions and millions of people who just, the next Steve Berry book is an automatic order. I'm not, yeah, you. and actually, yeah. So, I mean, but when you're breaking through, you don't have that. And so getting your name out there, I felt like if people were just aware of my books, they would like them. And sure enough, they did respond really well. But just being able to break through and get to readers is so critical. And it's hard because there's so many books out there now being published. And it's so much easier for everybody to just binge watch whatever's on HBO instead.
That makes me think of, as I was on Facebook this morning doing my normal little thing, and I saw a post from Mark Graney, and his publisher, Tom Colgan, saw on the billboard in Times Square one of those 30-second trailers for the Gray Man new movie that's coming out on Netflix, filmed it and sent it to Mark, and he posted it. But those kinds of things get the attention. That's true. Were you all lucky enough to get some special attention at one point that bumped you, or was it just grinding hard work that got you where you are?
I think for me, it's a mix. I'm literally on my second book, so it's very early in my career. I was very lucky to win that award, which kind of launched my career. Mystery Writers of America has a contest every year for unpublished writers of crime fiction. You could be published in something else. There was 600 entries, and winning that award really, did it for me. I have to admit, I was in a state of shock because I got to go to the Edgar Awards. I got to speak at the Edgar Awards. And this is like, I could not believe this. My husband and I looking at each other going, should we really be here? Maybe somebody made a mistake. That was great.
How about you, Steve? You've done an amazing amount of work with international thriller writers, forming the debut authors group that you host that breakfast, and you you showcase those authors. You really work hard for other authors. Are the people work hard for you at one point? Is that paying back?
Absolutely, absolutely. People did it for me. It's my turn to do it back. And so 15 years I did it with ITW, and gave my time and energy and everything for it. And that's our duty. We're supposed to do that. It's expected. We should do it. It's automatic. We should be doing it. And I'm very fortunate. My publisher spends a good bit of money on marketing and developing, and I'm grateful for that immeasurably. I do my part. I do my part on Facebook. I do my part on tour. I just finished 2 weeks on the road for the new book, touring. So I do the part that an author is supposed to do and what's expected to us. I'll do anything they ask me to do. I do it and stand up. It's a partnership. And I've just been very fortunate. I started in 2003, so I built one book at a time, one book at a time, one book at a time. And it started slow and kept going and kept going. And eventually, at some point, you become a brand. And when that moment happens, it's hard to say when that moment occurs, but there is a moment where it does occur. And when you become that brand, it does help a little bit. Yes, it does. It does help. I remember not being a brand, so I remember what that was like. So there's good and bad to it. But we're all commercial fiction writers, and our job is to write stories and to entertain people. And we sell books to make money. That's our job. It's a job. That's what we're here for. That's how we eat. And our primary job is to entertain. And like Clive Cussler told me once, he said, we're all entertainers. We just do it on a page. It's where we do it.
Well, and on that note, I'm going to throw it back to Tosca to ask you, I'm assuming, what's coming. So.
Well, thank you so much. Well, first, I just need to thank our fabulous authors, our guest tonight, Isabella Maldonado, Steve Berry, Susan Wiggs, and Nev March. You guys have been just fabulous. And I appreciate the fact that you were willing to sit down with us for an hour. I know that our viewers really look forward to this every month. So thank you for that. And thank you for donating books to our winners, which will soon be announced. So I hope everyone watching will join us next month on Monday, August 15th, with special guests Meg Gardner, Dan Fesperman, Gabino Iglesias, and Jeff Abbott. It's going to be super fun, very exciting. And so keep an eye out for that. Be sure and register for that. And if you choose to post about us or this cast that we did tonight, please use hashtags Rogue Reads and Rogue Women Writers so that we can share in that with you. So thank you, everybody, for joining us. It's been such a pleasure, really fun. And I wish that we had just had another hour to ask more questions. So thank you very much.
Enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's been a pleasure.
Bye-bye.